Behold, the pinnacle of classical architecture.
From glory to ruin, a timeless legacy. Ideas flourished, shaping the Western mind.
In the year 432 BC, Athens stood at the peak of its power and splendor, a city of perhaps 60,000 male citizens with the right to vote, surrounded by craftsmen, merchants, women, children, and slaves, who together formed a total population of hundreds of thousands of souls. For the first time in human history, ordinary citizens governed their own destiny through direct voting, without kings or tyrants deciding for them. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring ancient paintings, maps, and historical engravings to life, shifting perspectives, changing camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artists never could have imagined. The goal is not simply to look at the past, but to step into it, to walk through Athens as it once was, and feel what it would have been like to stand here at the exact moment when the West was being invented. And if you stick around until the end, we'll compare these same locations to how they look today to see what time has changed and what still remains. Before we set foot in ancient Athens, it helps to understand how this story began. Just half a century earlier, the Persians had completely ravaged the city, burning the temples on the Acropolis and destroying everything in their path. But the Athenians, led by Themistocles, achieved a decisive naval victory at Salamis that changed the course of history. From the ashes of that destruction, something extraordinary was born. An unprecedented rebuilding program that would transform Athens into the cultural center of the ancient world. With funds from the Delian League, a naval alliance created to defend against the Persians, the statesman Pericles ordered the construction of the most ambitious monuments ever conceived. What we are about to see is the result of that vision, captured at the precise moment of its culmination. This is the Acropolis, the sacred rock that dominates Athens from a height of more than 500 feet above the surrounding plain. In the year 432, the Parthenon has just been completed after 15 years of work. But what we see today, that dazzling white marble under the Mediterranean sun, is not what the Athenians saw. Their temples were painted in vibrant colors, intense reds, deep blues, brilliant golds. The sculptures on the pediments showed figures with painted eyes, red lips, and garments decorated with elaborate patterns. Imagine climbing up the rocky slope and encountering this explosion of color against the blue sky of Attica. Modern research using ultraviolet light and pigment analysis has revealed that virtually all Greek sculpture and architecture was polychrome, far removed from the whiteness we have come to associate with classical antiquity. We enter the Acropolis through the Propylaea, the monumental ceremonial gateway designed by the architect Mnesicles. In the year 432, this structure is also being completed, with its imposing Doric columns of Pentelic marble. The north wing houses a picture gallery, decorated with paintings by the celebrated artist Polygnotus. To pass through these porticos was to cross the threshold between the everyday world and the realm of the gods. Pilgrims ascending during the Panathenaic festivals would have experienced a gradual transformation as they climbed, leaving behind the bustle of the city to enter the most sacred space in Athens. And here is the Parthenon, the temple dedicated to Athena Parthenos, the virgin goddess and protector of the city. The architects Ictinus and Callicrates designed this building with extraordinary optical refinements. The columns lean slightly inward. The platform has a barely perceptible curvature, everything calculated so that the human eye perceives perfectly straight lines. Inside stood the colossal statue of Athena, created by Phidias, nearly 40 feet tall, covered in gold and ivory. The goddess held a figure of victory in her right hand and a spear in her left, with a shield decorated with scenes from the battle against the Amazons. Visitors entering the temple were dazzled by the gleam of gold reflecting the light streaming through the eastern doors. The Parthenon frieze, that continuous band of sculptures encircling the building, depicts the Panathenaic procession, the most important festival in Athens, celebrated every 4 years in honor of Athena. Here we see citizens, horsemen, musicians and maidens advancing toward the gods of Olympus. It is the first time in the history of Greek art that mortals appear alongside divinities in the decoration of a temple. The metopes show mythical battles, Greeks against centaurs, gods against giants, Greeks against Trojans. Each scene is an allegory of civilization's victory over barbarism, of order over chaos, of Athens over her enemies. We descend from the sacred rock toward the agora, the beating heart of Athenian life. This open space of roughly 30 acres served simultaneously as marketplace, political center, court of law, and social gathering place. Here, under the columned porticos called stoas, citizens debated philosophy, closed business deals, listened to orators, and participated in the affairs of the city. Each trade had its assigned section. Fish sellers in one area, potters in another, money changers in yet another. The agora was not simply a marketplace of goods, it was a marketplace of ideas. The daily newspaper of Athens, with its headlines, breaking news and editorials. In this very place, in these very years, a barefoot man of disheveled appearance stopped passers-by to ask them uncomfortable questions. Socrates was around 38 years old in 432 BC, and he had already earned a reputation as the gadfly of Athens, stinging the certainties of his fellow citizens with questions that exposed the fragility of what they thought they knew. His method consisted not of teaching, but of questioning, a technique we now know as the Socratic method. Imagine encountering him here, among the market stalls and public buildings, being stopped by this strange figure who asks you what justice is, what virtue is, what knowledge is. Without knowing it, these Athenians were witnessing the birth of Western philosophy. Near the agora stands the Bouleuterion, where the Council of 500 met, the body that prepared the agenda for the popular assembly. The 500 members were chosen by lot from among citizens over 30 years of age, 50 from each of the 10 tribes of Athens. This system guaranteed that any ordinary citizen could participate in the government of his city. On the other side of the agora, the painted stoa displayed works by Polygnotus, depicting the Battle of Marathon and other glorious moments in Athenian history. The Stoic philosophers, centuries later, would take their name from this building where they used to gather. A short distance west of the agora, on a rocky hill called the Pnyx, the ecclesia gathered, the assembly of all citizens. Here, any Athenian male over 20 years of age could speak and vote on matters of state, declarations of war, peace treaties, construction of public buildings, political trials. Voting was by simple majority, usually by show of hands. Public slaves used a rope dipped in red dye to herd citizens from the agora toward the assembly, and those who arrived stained with red were fined for their tardiness. Athenian democracy was direct, not representative. Citizens did not elect others to decide for them, but made every decision themselves. Any given meeting could be attended by several thousand citizens, with a quorum of 6,000 required for the most important votes. On the southern slope of the Acropolis lies the Theatre of Dionysus, where every spring the great Dionysia was celebrated, the most important theatrical festival in Athens. In this space, which could hold up to 17,000 spectators, playwrights competed for prizes by presenting their works before the assembled citizenry. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Aristophanes, all premiered their masterpieces here. In the year 432, Sophocles is 64 years old and at the height of his career, while Euripides, younger and more controversial, presents tragedies that question traditional values. The plays were not mere entertainment, they were moral and civic education, reflections on power, justice, fate, and human responsibility presented before the entire community gathered together. Toward the port of Piraeus, connected to Athens by the long walls, extended the naval power that made all this splendor possible. The Athenian fleet, with hundreds of triremes, dominated the Aegean and guaranteed the flow of tribute from allied cities. Each trireme required 170 rowers, and these men from the humblest classes had gained political power thanks to their military importance. The radical democracy of Pericles rested upon the rowing benches of the Athenian fleet. But this power also generated resentment among allies forced to pay tribute, and among Sparta, the land power that watched Athens' growth with alarm. Returning to the center of the city is worth pausing at the temple of Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalworking, located on the western edge of the Agora, atop a small hill. This Doric temple, begun in 449 BC, is one of the best preserved in all of Greece because it was converted into a Christian church during the Middle Ages. In its surroundings worked the blacksmiths and potters of Athens, and the smoke from their kilns rose alongside the temple rooftops. Sacred life and daily life constantly intermingled in the ancient city. Unbeknownst to the Athenians, their world was about to change forever. Tensions with Sparta and its allies had reached a breaking point. Athens' alliance with Corcyra had infuriated Corinth, and the Megarian decrees had closed Athenian ports to another Spartan ally. In assemblies held in both cities, the hawks defeated the doves. In just 1 year, in 431 BC, the Peloponnesian War would erupt, a 27-year conflict that would devastate Greece. 2 years after the war began, a terrible plague would sweep through Athens, killing perhaps a third of the population, including Pericles himself. The golden dream we are contemplating would fade away in blood, disease, and defeat. Knowing what we know now, it is strange to think how ordinary this place must have felt at the time. The citizens walking through the Agora, the craftsmen carving the last metopes of the Parthenon, the philosophers debating under the porticos. None of them knew they were living in what posterity would call the golden age of Athens. For them, it was simply their everyday life, with its mundane concerns, its political rivalries, its anxieties about the future. Greatness is only perceived in retrospect. Now I want to bring you into the present and show you how these places look today. Thanks for being here, and if you have suggestions or requests for future cities, share them in the comments. The Acropolis still dominates the Athens skyline, though now it rises above a metropolis of nearly 4 million inhabitants. The Parthenon has lost its roof, its colors, and the statue of Athena, but its columns continue to stand as a symbol of Western civilization. A restoration project ongoing since 1975 works meticulously to preserve what remains and correct previous interventions that damage the structure. The Agora today is an archaeological park where visitors walk among the foundations of buildings that once housed the birth of democracy and philosophy. The Stoa of Attalos, reconstructed in the 1950s, gives an idea of how these columned porticos looked, though without the marketplace bustle that once filled them. The Temple of Hephaestus remains nearly intact, one of the best preserved Greek temples in the world. The Theatre of Dionysus shows the stone seating added centuries after its golden age, when the stage was wooden and spectators sat on the natural hillside. A short distance away, the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, built in Roman times, hosts concerts and performances today under the stars of Attica. Of the Pnyx, little remains, but the terraces carved into the rock where citizens once sat to vote. From here, the view of the Acropolis illuminated at sunset reminds us that democracy, that idea born on these hills 2,500 years ago, remains the most influential political ideal in human history. I do really appreciate you watching. Your ideas, input, and constructive feedback really do shape what comes next. Feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.